aren't able to make it tonight, and definitely if I didn't record this one, they would kill me. So it is being recorded. In any case, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you are all getting your newsletters. The newsletters give us all of our current information, and you will need that to know what to do to join our programs. Just briefly, there were some errors in the September calendar, so your newsletters are always the most up-to-date and current. On Tuesday, the book club will be doing The Hate You Give. It is a definite banned book. It is a fabulous book. And if you can, if you're in the area, join us for it. And you will really have a wonderful experience with Linda Levin. And the other thing I just want to make sure to tell you is on Tuesday, the 26th of September, is our annual meeting. Our year goes October 1 to October 1, the end of September. We have our annual meeting. You're always welcome to attend any of our board meetings that are now in person. There will be a small reception for the first 15 minutes, calling it at 6. At 6:15 will be our meeting. We will honor the volunteers, of which we have the most phenomenal volunteers possible. We will introduce the slate for the new year for the board, and then we will have a wonderful speaker on climate change, something that is obviously on everybody's mind these days. And that will bring us back next to Shelly's next movie, which he will tell you about himself. Tonight's movie, I absolutely loved it, and I am so excited to hear how Shelly will talk to us about it. To me, it was one of the best movies. So Shelly, take it away, and I'm all ears.
Thank you, Marilyn, and thank you, everybody. This is overwhelming. I think this is a record tonight, seeing so many people here. Thank you all for coming. I hope you all have been having a nice summer. It's great to be back. It really is. So let's dive in. The film The Silent Revolution, Das Schweigende Klassenzimmer. Forgive my German. And it is from 2018. The director, his name is Lars Kraum. He is German, but he was born in Italy. He goes back and forth between Italy and Germany. He directs in Italy. He directs in Germany as well. He directs in 2 languages. He does mostly TV, but you will know who he is because the last film he did before this, or I should just say the film he did prior to this one, was The People versus Fritz Bauer. The People versus Fritz Bauer. Another great film, which wound up winning something like 9 German Academy Awards. This one has also garnered some awards. But in his own words, he speaks about both films, and he sees both Fritz Bauer, and you've seen the films, both films, so you'll know what he's talking about. But he sees both Fritz Bauer and The Silent Revolution as films that very much mirror each other. Meaning, and these are his words, I had come to question of how it must have felt like to live in Germany after the Third Reich. Kraum says both films deal fundamentally with the question of how this deeply damaged country could move forward, how Germany sought a way out of this horrible past and towards a new future. The German Democratic Republic as a state and society was one way. The Federal Republic of Germany was the other. Both attempts were difficult. I tried to show that in both these films. Well, we certainly got the Federal Republic of Germany in The People versus Fritz Bauer. Now we move over to the other side, the German Democratic Republic. And as we've seen, it's a look back at a divided Germany in the late 50s, prior to the wall, and includes events based on a book. The book is entitled The Silent Classroom, a true story of courage, Togetherness, and the Cold War, an autobiographical account of Dietrich Gartzka. And he was a student in East Germany during the Hungarian Uprising in 1956. So, just a little background of the history. From October 23rd to November 10th in 1956, it was the first major threat to the Soviet control. Since the USSR's forces drove out the Nazis, the Soviet Union cracked down on Hungary with troops when a student protest attracting thousands to march through central Budapest. A student delegation was detained in what was known as the radio building, which is mentioned. The protesters demanded their release and were eventually fired upon. While these events did not receive truthful coverage in East Germany, and because information was still able to travel from west to east at the time during this period, they became the catalyst for the silent revolution. The broadcast and all of these things became the catalyst. We are first introduced, as you met, Kurt, the son of a high-ranking communist, and Theo, the son of a steelworker, as they lie their way across the border to catch a forbidden movie. But unexpectedly, their excitement is overshadowed by newsreel footage, which gives a harrowing account of Hungary's attempt to oust the occupying Soviets. When they return, we see how their lives and the lives of their fellow students and families are affected when they come into conflict with the highest positions in the state apparatus, known as the GDR, or German Democratic Republic. The film provides a tremendous amount of insight into the complex socio-political and historical background, detailing all the differences between 1950s East and West Germany and between post-war Germany and the recent Nazi past, and revealing what a difficult and equally heavily politicized time these kids had in 1956, what they were going through. With an appealing cast and a cinematic eye for detail, we see that even the youth can rise above and exercise an ability to see through a repressive state in this intelligent, resonant, and very relevant reflection told in very human terms. We see not just the act of protest, but it deftly recounts the crescendo of the consequences of the act. It's like a ripple effect that goes out. It is one thing for Theo and Kurt to deliver the news of what they saw in the West, but we see how it becomes more meaningful when they hear it on the radio with their fellow students and agree to their 2-minute protest. After visiting their friend Paul's great uncle Edgar and hear the West German broadcast revealing the death of Ferenc Puskás, a soccer hero, to the students, which unfortunately ultimately turned out to be misinformation, but possibly intended to infuriate the protesters. It might have been put out in Hungary to infuriate the protesters. It is understandable that the principal of the school would like to keep the incident under wraps. But we see how one teacher and this totalitarian regime goes about applying their underhanded techniques to wring out the ringleaders, relying on a complete absence of dissension and perfect alignment, as in the uniformed rows. We see how school is conducted uniformly. At Stalinstadt, an interesting name for the school, Stalinstadt, where school involves propagandist education accompanied by paramilitary training, it's difficult to ignore the similarities between the new regime, where the word friendship has become a slogan, and the frightful previous Nazi regime, which preceded it, used by the Communist Party as an ambiguous scarecrow. Fritz Lange, the Minister of Education in East Germany, he was a real person. He was ironically a resistance fighter against the Nazis. But being a communist, he is not above using some of their techniques to get the student Eric to confess, and getting Edgar arrested. The great Paul's great uncle Edgar arrested. Um, but it is Frau. And by the way, just so you know, the actor playing Fritz Langer also played Fritz Bauer. So not only does he jump the fence to East Germany, he's now a communist. So it's very interesting in terms of an acting portrayal. He's a fabulous actor, by the way. But it is Frau Kressler who puts more pressure on the students, interrogating them one by one and going so far as to tell Eric how his father, who he always believed to be a socialist hero, was a Nazi collaborator, was hung as a Nazi collaborator. And when Eric also confesses to betraying Kurt, and Kessler tries to convince Kurt to put the blame on Eric, let's turn everybody against everybody, it pushes him to decide to defect to the West. And in a moment of true solidarity, the class refuses to implicate Kurt and are all expelled and flee collectively to the West. The film perfectly captures the paranoia of the period when liberal, artistically inclined intellectuals were demonized and state-sponsored media twisted the facts into fake news that pushed a specific agenda. All sounds too familiar, especially the way education was being treated and what's happening in our country today. The film succeeds very well in describing the atmosphere of 1956 Eastern Germany, both in the details of the setting, the homes, the school, the cars, everything, down to the clothes, as well as in the psychology of the characters and the sensation of permanent pressure and surveillance that they had to live in. I especially liked how the relationship between the youths in the group, and one can feel their youthful experience at the music they hear from the West, and of their hopes as well as fears, their revolt in face of injustice, and their incomprehension when faced with the lies their educators and even their parents had told them. Families and friends lived in such constant fear of reprimand that they would rather turn in each other than face the consequences. Besides terror, the film also displays moments of humor when we see how the communist occupiers overreact to even the mildest act of sedition, especially the teacher at the beginning. And we realize that for people and a country who would rather forget their past, their hastily buried family secrets can be weaponized at will by the unscrupulous powers that be, namely Theo's father's past. If you remember, when Theo's father goes to Langer and discusses the fact of letting the boys off, he's reminded by Langer that he took part in the 1953 Workers' Revolution, which meant he would work menially. He obviously is a lot smarter than his job, but he was forced to work in the steel mill. Or even Eric's father's past. They used that as a weapon against him. While staying united is about the freedom of everyone, it can't be manipulated any more than the silence can be broken. Which is what's interesting in the film. Expulsion from the school may not seem like a horrible punishment, but when in fact consequences could have been actually much tougher. In fact, based on research, based on what I read, and that probably would have been the case if these young people in the group were just a few years older. In Germany and other parts of the communist, in East Germany and other parts of the communist bloc, people were sent to jail or re-education camps for many years because of similar shows of solidarity with the 1956 revolts in Hungary. Thankfully, for many of them, being expelled would not condemn them to live menial lives. As we see, it was better to take the risk of fleeing to the West. And as we see, what looks like a Hollywood ending actually was for all but 4 of those students, as they left, some with their parents' blessing, they succeeded in the West. They all led successful lives in the West, especially Dietrich Gartzke, who wrote the book. And he said they completely underestimated us, thinking we were little puppets who believed what the great socialists said. And it is hopeful that young people will always remain active and involved when there are issues worth fighting for, whether politically, economically, or ecologically. If I wanted to be ironic, this is Gartzke. If I wanted to be ironic, I could say we had the luck of growing up in a dictatorship and we could show that rebelliousness and we learned to be rebels. He said that's the only true blessing of growing up in a dictatorship. Crown, the director, resolutely delivers a film that does exactly what most other films inspired by true facts do not do. It provides us with an intelligent and finely tuned reflection with an overwhelming, fundamentally human core, vibrating with all its strength from beginning to end. And that is true. It gets you in its grip from the very beginning and it keeps you there. But it is the atmosphere of the film, the details of the film, the acting. Those kids were terrific. The older actors were also very good. The film stayed focused. I mean, and it was inclusive. Even the scenes with Uncle Edgar, who we learned was a homosexual, we realized he too was oppressed and he rebelled and he paid for it. He paid for it. So there you have it in a nutshell about the film, some of the scenes that were covered. And of course, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your feelings on the film. So let's open up this great giant forum. And remember, you can always raise your little hand if there's a little yellow hand, or raise your hand and I'll see you. Don't worry, I am looking around. Unfortunately, I can't see the people who are just names, but they can raise their little yellow hands if they want to speak. So who's going to go first? Because it'll be tough if I have to pick. Who wants to go first? Do I see a hand? Yes, Elena, go right in there. You got to unmute, Elena.
There's so much to talk about in this film. We could have a conversation for hours about all the aspects of when the Nazis were there, when the Nazis left, and the communists came, and the oppression of the GDR, and then the building of the wall, and how many people were willing to die just to get out of there and go across to the West. But I'll give what I'm going to bring up is a very tiny thing. The women in the movie were so suppressed. They looked battered. They looked brutalized. And I couldn't get over how they sat quietly when bad things were happening to their children. So I just wanted to make that comment, like, why would that be the case? Why would the women be so put down and not have a voice of their own in their own house?
Well, it is an interesting question, and one of the things is that it's not that long after World War II. Number one, and you say, you know, Nazism didn't just go away. We know that. We know that as a fact. And the shadow of Nazism was still there. First of all, it's evinced in the scene with the high school teacher who's training them to use the guns. He was basically a Nazi, and probably was. So you get that. That's number one, and therefore it's the way they would put. You know, it was patriarchal. They were, you know, that's the way the Germans were. And that's the way they still are. Even though they're communists, they're not Russian. It's a whole different ball of wax we're dealing with here. You know, that suppression is going to be there. You know, and also a lot of people just keep your head down, don't say anything that can implicate you. There's that too. But women, but see, there was a balance because we see that Kessler, the superintendent, was a woman. So we see that balance. And some of the girls in high school were outspoken. I mean, so you see a new generation coming in, is what I'm saying. And that therefore, things would change for that, It was a good question. Good question. Jackie and Larry. Jackie and Larry.
Elena, did you want to say something else?
Just one last thing that you brought up.
Sure.
Shelley, was that female superintendent. She was so evil.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard to watch her do her shtick. She was so evil. And the guys she worked for, those were people who were pure evil. They didn't have one bone of sympathy, empathy, caring. And they learned the lessons well from the Nazis.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, as I said, Langer, who was real, and he was considered a hero in World War II because he was part of the resistance to the Nazis, only because he was a communist. So therefore, but then when the communists took over, we saw a hard line. We saw the same hard line. It didn't change. It really didn't change. At least in most areas, it didn't change. Thank you, Elena. Okay, Jackie and Larry.
Well, I was going to say, I respectfully kind of disagree about the women. I think that we have a terrible tendency to judge yesterday by today's standards. And when you think about the time, we always talk about patriarchal societies, and yet those mothers actually had a tremendous amount to do with what was going on. And in reality, both mothers were the ones who pushed the sons and allowed it and let the boys go. So when you stop and think about it, the Kurt's mother was the one who actually said, get out and go. And the other mother was there too. So I think often it's that silent majority thing. And people think because you're not outspoken that you have nothing to say or you have no influence. And I think that that's really, like I said, judging yesterday by today's standards.
It's you know what? It's not even judging yesterday. It's sometimes women will play that role. Even though they are, they're smart. Let's face it. They're not, they're not just statues. And those women were aware. They knew how far they can go with their husbands. But when it came to their sons, then they can exercise more influence. And also, the smarts. She knew, one of the mothers knew, if you don't get out of here, it's over. You have to go. And one of them was married to the guy who eventually goes, the father who eventually is so stern, but then goes to help his son. We realize that because of the mother. So yes, it's very well taken. You amplify. Thank you. Who's next? Linda Pava.
Shelly, I have a question. Was that Eric on the train?
No. Eric was arrested.
There was a boy there. I couldn't see exactly who that was.
Yeah, no, Eric was arrested. He was taken away. He was taken away. That's what happened to him. So no, he didn't make it out. Also because he went on the attack in the church with his gun. So he was just arrested. Marilyn? Oh, I thought your hand was up.
It was up and then it was down because I was going to say how Kessler was a woman also. And but what I want to say was I love the cast. I thought that whoever did the casting did an amazing job. Kurt and Theo, I thought were phenomenal. And what was the girl's name? Lena. I just thought the cast was great. And when I saw Theo's father, I said, oh my God, I know him. And I looked him up and we saw him in Barbara and we saw him in Fitz and we saw him in Fitzbauer. And we saw him in, what do you call it? Phoenix. And I said, he was excellent in this one also. But I just love this movie, and I thought the cast was fabulous.
Oh, it was, and you know, I mean, it was a top cast, a top German cast. I mean, Ronald Zerfeld, who played the father, is one of Germany's top actors today. You know, you had Burkhard Klaubner, who played Fritz Brauer, is wonderful. So you had a really good cast. Even yes, Lena Klenk is her name, who starred in it, who played Lena. So you did have, you know, these kids were
That's great.
terrific. I mean, they're all actors. They are all actors.
But what I
And
really loved, Shelley, was the camaraderie, the feeling of loyalty and camaraderie. And it wasn't like just each one for himself. It was like they were willing to give up something so precious to them because they felt a loyalty to what they believed was their truth. And it was just something beautiful to see among youth like that. That
yeah,
was
I mean,
a great concept.
it's an interesting comment, because ironically, that's what communism is supposed to be. You know, is this solidarity, this staying together, this being together in one true thing. And they realized how disillusioned they had become, because they were lied to, you know, the propaganda, and then what was being done, because they simply stayed silent for their own brothers and sisters in Hungary, and, you know, their fellow high school students in Hungary, or the protesters in Hungary, and to be subjected to what they were subjected to is total disillusionment. Yet they used the same tactic against them.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
will
against them.
unify,
Yeah.
and they won, and they won
That's
by
very
getting out.
clever. Very
Yes,
clever.
very clever. Thank you, Marilyn. Paula.
Yeah, that's just where I was going when I raised my hand. I thought it was so spectacular that these young adults could have such morals and values and stick together and protect one another. I found that so beautiful.
Yes, yes, it is. It is. And we've seen examples of it here in this country, after a crisis, after a catastrophe. You know, we can point here in Florida. I mean, it's that when these kids stand up, and they were heard, and they are heard. And I hope they will be heard more, especially here in Florida. So thank you, Paula. Jackie, did you have any more? Did we leave your hand up there?
No, I didn't leave my hand up there, but this is going to be a moment no one is prepared for.
Okay.
Couple
Oh,
things.
Larry! He
Well,
speaks!
the brutality was really more the Russians than the Germans when you think about it. I mean, they had the concentration camps, and they were brutal in one respect, but they treated the others somewhat fairly. I mean, soldiers were soldiers, this type of thing. But when you look at the Russians, I mean, they executed every single officer above the rank of captain, because they just thought they were getting too powerful and they might impact the president at one point. That was what, 200,000 officers in their army they just killed for no reason. They started the Jewish elimination 30 years before Hitler. And so many things they did were so brutal. They really were, you know, they killed all their own prisoners coming back from the war because they thought it was a sign of weakness that they allowed themselves to become a prisoner. Stalin even killed his own son for that. So you really have to say who was the brutality was the Russians and their influence on the communists. You know, they were the controllers of the Communist Party in Germany at that time. So that's really where your true level of hate came in.
Yeah, the battle was, in fact, before it, even after World War One, it was the fact that, you know, the Bolsheviks, and the communists, you know, had to be eliminated, and that's what Hitler went after first. But I don't know, you're a student of history, so you know about Katyn, what the Russians did in Poland. They eliminated 10,000 Polish officers, and they did it Nazi style, with a bullet in the back of the head to make it look like the Nazis did it. And the Nazis were blamed for it at first, and then they realized later on it was the Russians that set the whole thing up. So they took what the Nazis did, and also what they did, and it just amplified. They were treacherous. They were treacherous. We see it. It didn't stop. It hasn't stopped. So it still goes on. It still goes on. We see them now exercising once again their power to try and regain the Soviet bloc with what they did, what they're doing in Ukraine, which hopefully will fail entirely and stop. But thank you, Larry. Thank you. Anybody else? Come on, I expect to see more hands tonight.
Michelle put something in the
in the chat.
chat regarding if there was a significance in the fact that they were eating chicken soup with matzo balls. Was anybody Jewish there? Was it?
Well, there's no so-called religion, and I don't know. I don't think so, because probably they were, there weren't in those. These were smaller towns. These were smaller places. The chances were the Jews that didn't return to those places. They wouldn't want to go back to those places. They went back to Berlin. There were 5,000 originally, and there weren't that much more. Many more started to come back later on, especially after the division. But most of the Jews that returned also returned to the West. They didn't stay in the East. They didn't want to. But chicken soup is also German.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's a universal antidote. Anybody else? Oh, nobody else had anything to say? Do I have to implicate somebody?
Let me just say something else, and if nobody's saying anything. It was interesting to me how many secrets were kept in this subtly, and how the Germans pulled out whatever they could to have as leverage against anybody to get them to follow what they wanted them to follow. The kid, Lena, your grandmother, we're gonna keep her, we're gonna take away her job, or we're gonna tell Theo's father, and he won't be able to continue working because of what happened in 53. And it was just really so disgusting that they would do that, but that's what they do. And they've been still fear. And so to me, it was just showing how, whether it was the communists or the Nazis, or I guess anybody, we think of it with authoritarianism, and maybe that's true, but there's the fear that is instilled in people, and the anger and the fear is just what's so frightening in any community or any country, where that is the most important thing to get them to have what they want.
Yes, and it's the idea that they will do anything to suppress any other voice but their own. That's really what it comes down to, is the suppression of any voice but their own. Ultimate power.
Control and power, it's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Merrily.
Hi, Shirley. I thought, and maybe I'm dreaming, that Theo had a chain around his neck with a chai hanging from it.
That's interesting. Now I have to go back and look.
I am too.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and look at it. And I will let you know, I promise. But I will see. It's possible. I don't know. But also, based on what Marilyn's saying, is what they did to Theo's father, what Langer did to Theo's father. It was bad enough he had to work in a steel mill, because he was obviously a very smart man. But his having to take Theo to the steel mill, and he said, "You're going to go there," because basically, father wants to show his son, "Look what I have to do, so you don't have to do this." But he would have been condemned to this had he stayed. You know, that's what probably would have happened if you didn't go to a re-education camp. He would have been sent to the steel mill. So these are the things we have to look at. These are things we have to realize. It is, you know, Jackie made a good point. We have to put everything into context. This is 1956. What was happening in the United States in 1956? We were going through a blacklisting period. We had just come out of Army McCarthy hearings. We had come out of, you know, we were still embedded in the Hollywood blacklist. It was terrible. Teachers were blacklisted. And all by just somebody pointing a finger. If they didn't like you, they'd call you a communist. Or if you had, you know, we have to remember back in the 30s, a lot of people did sympathize with communism because of what was happening in Spain when they were trying to overthrow Franco. But then they learned after the war, you know, and also Russia wanted to be an ally. Until it wasn't anymore. So it was you know, all of these things we have to look at historically, but around the world, I mean, everybody was a mess. I mean, we were experiencing a terrible political period during that time. And again, people didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to, you know, you were afraid to speak because somebody, you know, and if somebody in your family had been associated with the Communist Party, you could be in a lot of trouble. I know I experienced it in my own family. So it happens. And how many lives were destroyed as a result of it? So we have to look contextually at history to see these things, but hopefully they are lessons. You know, unfortunately, I don't think the right people will see the films, but, you know, one can only hope. One can only hope. Anybody else? Linda Hawk, you usually have something to say. Come on. You got to unmute, Linda. You have to unmute.
Okay, I sound better muted. But anyway, I don't have anything really to add. It's pretty much all been said, but I do agree with what's been said. I thought it was a powerful movie. I found it very inspiring, very frightening, you know, because as we see so many places, including the U.S., tending toward the, you know, autocratic government and everything. And so, you know, it's scary. It's scary to see, and more people need to pay attention. And I like the fact that it was the youth, because I think that's what this country really needs now, is the youth to rise up and try to secure the world that they want to live in. And so I like the movie. I thought it was a great choice.
Thank you. And I think you're right. That's probably the greatest lesson. And if young people could see this film and realize, you know, the power they can wield, it would be terrific. It would be terrific. But so maybe I made you all feel a little younger tonight, hopefully. Okay, well, if there's no more to add, I will get into the next film. On September 20th, we'll be seeing a film. It's from Belgium and France. And the film is The Kid with a Bike. The Kid with a Bike. Now, this is by a directorial team, Jean-Pierre and Luc Dardenne. They have remained throughout their career two of the most steadfast, consistent directors of what I call modern neorealism, number one. And they have won, they're among the biggest winners at the Cannes Film Festival when they do have a film, whether for a screenplay, for best film, or even their actors. This was the first film where they used a well-known actor. Her name is Cécile France. She's a very popular actor in France, a beautiful woman. Anyway, this is The Kid with a Bike follows a young boy, Cyril. He's 11 years old, and he has no mother, and he's been abandoned by his father to a basically what is an orphanage, what constitutes an orphanage. foster institution. And he is just determined to get back to his father. But when a local hairdresser offers to take him on weekends, his ambivalent behavior leads him down a darker path. And we go through that. But there is light on the other side. It is an absolutely beautiful film, a beautiful study of a young boy. I guess that is part of our theme of growing up. This is an award-winning film. It's received many awards around the world. It's full of I don't want to say symbology, but metaphor. A lot of metaphor. A lot of especially to spiritual situations. Beautifully shot. The visuals have a lot of meaning. So I hope you enjoy the film, and I'll look forward to seeing you.
Shelly, did you say the 20th? I believe it's the 27th.
The 27th.
Oh, I had the wrong date on my calendar here. Okay, yes, the 27th. Thank you, Paula. Yes, Ron.
Can I just want to mention that film was beautiful. I mean, the film that we watched, it brought tears to my eyes. It was just a marvelous film. The acting was superb. And as chance would have it, I was watching Tubi, and after the movie finished, I guess they must kind of recommend a movie that kind of fits what you just watched. So I watched a movie the next day called The Fencer. And I will highly recommend it to all of you. If you like this film, you will like The Fencer. It's like they're bookends to each other.
Was that
Yeah.
Fencer?
Highly recommend The
F-E-N-C-E-R?
Fencer.
Fencer. Yeah, it's about a fencing teacher. It is a touching film. It is a very well done film. So yes. In fact, I think it was shortlisted for the Academy Award a few years ago. Elena, you got to unmute, Elena.
I didn't get the full information on what films are to be shown when. So the next day is the 27th?
7th, yeah. And just, go on and register at the Friends, and you'll be able to always see the calendar.
Elena, in order for us to get, those of us who are friends of the library get this in our newsletter every week.
Okay.
And so if you want to check us out and see what this is doing and all of the others, just check us out at www.stirlingfriends.org and see if it appeals to you.
Perfect. The second thing was, where do I see this movie, The Kid with the Bike?
On Canopy. Mainly on Canopy. It's available on a lot of, when you go to justwatch.com, I always recommend this to people.
All
it's justwatch.com. It'll tell you where to see it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome, Elena. I
Shelly,
also wanted.
Can
Yes.
you stay on a moment longer?
Afterwards for a second, sure. I also want to wish everybody who's celebrating a happy new year, a happy and healthy new year.
And to you and your beautiful wife.
Thank you. I will tell her. Thank you, Paul.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.